Hello everyone. We are back once again for another talk time with Doug and Tanya. That's right. Last week we talked about Abraham and Isaac. This week we're going to move on to Jacob and Esau, and those are the sons of Isaac.
Isaac, right.
They're twin sons that look nothing alike or have none of the same interest or do anything alike. Imagine that. Siblings that don't look alike or have anything in common. Imagine that. That's a pretty common thing, actually.
But these were twins, so you'd think they would look alike and have some characteristics and so forth.
Twins do tend to be closer, I would think, normally. Aren't they? Isn't that what you think of it, like a twin? Aren't they supposed to have like a sixth sense about each other, or know when one's in pain
you hear that.
or upset? I don't know. I don't have any twins.
I don't think that was happening in this case.
No, it's a very dysfunctional family, and we've noticed that a lot throughout the Bible. There was a lot of dysfunction.
Setting the scene. Abraham and Sarah's son Isaac married Rebekah, and they had twin boys, Esau and Jacob. From the beginning, these two were rivals, jostling in Rebekah's womb, with Jacob, the younger of the twins, grasping the brother's heel at birth. Though twins, they could not have been more different in both appearance and temperament. Esau was hairy and an outdoorsman who liked to hunt. Jacob was a smooth-skinned and quiet, preferring to spend time at home. Further fueling the rivalry, Isaac, a fan of wild game, preferred Esau, while Jacob was Rebekah's favorite.
Right there's a problem.
We see a problem right at the beginning.
You can sense it when parents have favorites. Even though all the kids would say Zachary was mine, he was just because he was the baby. But I would never ever dream of causing problems between the children.
Yes.
Never.
They had favorites and they used that.
Yes, it's just not a good scenario. Not good at all. So, Mr. Chattybox tonight. So anyway, what we're going to do is we're going to break down this story. We're going to read so many verses and then we're going to discuss it a little bit. So I hope you have some things that you've looked up, and I've looked up a few things, but so I'm counting on you, Doug. And if you are really cold, go ahead and turn the heat on.
That's okay. I'll just sit here and shiver. No problem. No, I would, but the fan comes on and then it makes.
I mean, it will probably be okay if you turn it on low, maybe. So what we're going to do first is we're going to read verses 1 through 13, and we're in Genesis chapter 27. One thing, though, to keep in mind here, once again, these twins at this time are 40 years old.
Right. Yeah, they're not little kids.
They're not little
teenagers.
Kids. And could that cause some of the dysfunction in families that they hang out with each other so long? I mean, really. Could you imagine living with your brother till you're like in your 40s?
I wonder if that was common, though, back.
Well, it must have been, because we were talking before.
When Abraham took Isaac up to the mountain.
He was 18 to 30, it is estimated.
Yeah, you always thought of him as being a smaller child, but he wasn't.
He wasn't.
He was older.
So at 40, unless they aged differently back then, at 40, I'm thinking these boys shouldn't have even been kind of hanging out with each other, but apparently they were.
I think that was probably common.
So I'm going to get started here, and I'm going to start with chapter 27. When Isaac was old and his eyes were so weak that he could no longer see, he called for Esau, his older son, and said to him, "My son." "Here I am," he answered. Isaac said, "I am now an old man, and I don't know the day of my death. Now then, get your equipment, your quiver and bow, and go out to the open country to hunt some wild game for me. Prepare me the kind of tasty food I like and bring it to me to eat, so that I may give you my blessing before I die." Now Rebekah was listening as Isaac spoke to his son Esau. When Esau left for the open country to hunt game and bring it back, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, "Look, I overheard your father say to your brother Esau, 'Bring me some game and prepare me some tasty food to eat, so that I may give you my blessing in the presence of the Lord before I die.' Now, my son, listen carefully and do what I tell you. Go out to the flock and bring me 2 choice young goats, so I can prepare some tasty food for your father just the way he likes it. Then take it to your father to eat, so that he may give you his blessing before he dies." Jacob said to Rebekah, his mother, "But my brother Esau is a hairy man, while I have smooth skin. What if my father touches me? I would appear to be tricking him and would bring down a curse on myself rather than a blessing. His mother said to him, "My son, let the curse fall on me. Just do what I say. Go and get them for me." So we'll stop right there. Rebecca's kind of conniving. Right there, that's pretty conniving.
Yes, it was.
This is what I found interesting. On verse 5, now Rebecca was listening as Isaac spoke to his son, Esau. Not their son. His son, Esau. It's almost as if Esau was Isaac's child and Jacob was Rebecca's. It's almost like that's the way they treated. They both had their favorites. But to refer to that, I mean, it's just...
yeah, it kind of brings it out a little bit further when you look at it that way.
His son. Because normally we would refer to our child, if we're communicating, we wouldn't refer to it, I wouldn't say your son, unless I was kidding.
Or mad at me.
Or mad at you, yeah. But anyway, that was just one of the things I found interesting there. But I was going to read the commentary here. It says, Jacob hesitated when he heard Rebekah's deceitful plan. You did hear him pause for a minute. He did hesitate. Although he questioned it for the wrong reason. It was fear of getting caught. It wasn't fear of doing the wrong thing.
Right.
Fear of getting caught. He protested and thus gave her one last chance to reconsider. But Rebekah had become so wrapped up in her plan that she no longer saw clearly what she was doing. Sin had trapped her and was degrading her character. Correcting yourself in the middle of doing wrong may bring hurt and disappointment, but it also bring freedom from sin's control.
Well, maybe we need to back up a little bit and talk about even what Rebekah was trying to accomplish.
Go ahead.
We're talking about the blessing that usually goes to the older son, which would have been Esau.
Mm-hmm.
And boy, how do you even begin to explain this? Because in the chapter before, whenever Rebekah got pregnant, God told them that Esau, the older son, would not receive the blessing.
That's true.
But Esau would be under his brother Jacob. Isaac was taking things into his own hands because God had told them.
That's right. He should have been giving him the blessing
Esau
anyway.
was not to be getting the blessing. So Isaac took matters into his own hands, and he was going to give his blessing to Esau instead of Jacob.
That's right. See, I didn't pick up on that. That is really good.
So here we are. We got Isaac doing one thing against God, and now we have Rebekah conniving to restore what God was going to do. Neither one of them had enough faith just to allow God to have things play out. Rebekah felt that she needed to
do it too. That's right.
To deceive Isaac to get God's plan and have Jacob receive the blessing. So
then in all reality, Rebekah was trying to do what God had already told them would happen.
she wasn't doing that in order to please God or to make sure God's plan was in effect. She was doing that because she wanted Jacob to receive that.
That was her favorite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She too was not having faith in God and just allowing God to work all this out. She took it upon herself to make sure that he received the blessing.
Kind of like the same way with Abraham and Sarah.
Yeah.
How they took it into their own hands to have Isaac, and Ishmael came along. Yeah. So they just can't wait. And you know, we're all guilty of that today. We seem to not want to wait for God's timing. We think we have to hurry it along.
We need to intercede. We need to do it. We want it now. And we want it our way and when we want it. And that's kind of what's happening here. So we're at the part where Rebekah is preparing Jacob to go into his father, deceive his father, and to receive the blessing.
Do you want to read verses 14 through 21?
So he went and got them and brought them to his mother, and she prepared some tasty food, just the way his father liked it. Then Rebekah took the best clothes of Esau, her older son, which she had in the house, and put them on her younger son Jacob. She also covered his hands and smoothed part of his neck with goatskins. Then she handed to her son Jacob the tasty food and the bread she had made. He went to his father and said, "My father." "Yes, my son," he answered. "Who is it?" Jacob said to his father, "I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you told me. Please sit up and eat some of my game so that you may give me your blessing." Isaac asked his son, "How did you find it so quickly, my son?" "The Lord your God gave me success," he replied. Then Isaac said to Jacob, "Come near so I can touch you, my son, to know whether you really are my son Esau or not."
Right there, isn't that like he doesn't trust already? Like, what would there been deception in this family that, he wants to touch him to make sure it's the right son? He even says, "How did you do that so fast?" Like, could he be questioning already? Or is he getting senile, like he can't hear, or what,
I don't know. You think the boys would not have sounded so much alike?
No,
It doesn't tell us, what did he have to change his voice to try to sound like his brother?
Well,
even feeling goat skins on, you think you would feel the difference between that. So it's really an odd situation.
It's an odd thing here, and it makes you question of whether Isaac had all of his faculties too. That like, could he hear? Was he thinking logically at some point in time? Because it does say on down there about the voice. It talks about the voice being different. You sound like my son Jacob. That type of thing. So I'm thinking, okay, Dad, what's going on? Also, too, even though children, he might be deceived by the hairiness of it and everything else like that, but children have totally different personalities, too. Even if you were to talk, if you talk to your dad, and Dustin talks to your dad, and David talks to your dad, you all have different personalities. Your father's going to pick up on that. He's going to hear your voice. He's going to know your ways. And that just goes to show you that there's a little bit of distance there, because none of the kids could fool me that they were one or the other, I don't think.
I don't think they could either. Now, he was blind. He couldn't see.
I'm wondering if he couldn't hear half right, too.
This commentary said he lived by his feelings. Isaac was blind and apparently bedfast. So he may not have had all of his faculties together, or like you said, maybe that was just how far this family had really divided.
Yeah, for him to even question, "Let me make sure that you're my son, that you're Esau." That just put up a red flag to me. Like, why does he have to check or verify this? Another thing, wouldn't you think that Jacob's heart would be pounding? Whenever you try to deceive someone and you're not doing what's right.
Especially when you're already worried about getting caught before you go in.
Before you go in. So next I'll read verses 22 through 29. Jacob went close to his father Isaac, who touched him and said, "The voice is the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esau." He did not recognize him, for his hands were hairy like those of his brother Esau. So he proceeded to bless him. "Are you really my son Esau?" he asked. He did it again. He asked again, "Are you really my son?" "I am," he replied. Then he said, "My son, bring me some of your game to eat, so that I may give you my blessing." Jacob brought it to him, and he ate. And he brought some wine, and he drank. Then his father Isaac said to him, "Come here, my son, and kiss me." So he went to him and kissed him. When Isaac caught the smell of his clothes, he blessed him and said, "Ah, the smell of my son is like the smell of the field that the Lord has blessed. May God give you heaven's dew and earth's riches, and abundance of grain and new wine. May nations serve you and peoples bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may the sons of your mother bow down to you. May those who curse you be cursed, and those who bless you be blessed." Here's a little commentary for this. Right there, he is blessing him. And you're thinking at this point in time, and we'll get into that, well, when Esau came back, couldn't Isaac just say, "Hey, I gave it to the wrong kid.
You deceived me. That don't count."
Me. Yeah, it ain't happening. But we'll get into that in a minute. But Here it says here under the commentary here, although Jacob got the blessing he wanted, deceiving his father cost him dearly. These are some of the consequences of that deceit. He never saw his mother again.
And that fell on her too.
Yeah.
She loved.
That was her favorite.
Yeah,
and she never
got to see him again after that.
No. His brother wanted to kill him. Now that's a big negative right there, you know. I mean, that hairy beast of a man who's out there, you know, I'd be afraid of him.
Yeah, he could definitely do it.
He was deceived by his uncle Laban. Remember, didn't he have to, which wife was it? Wait a minute, am I thinking of the right one? Yeah, Jacob. Was it Jacob that had to work for his second wife? They gave him Leah first. He had to work for 7 years.
He had to work for 7 years, and then he got the wrong woman.
Yeah.
And had to work for another 7 years to get the one he truly loved.
Yep.
Yeah.
His family became torn by strife. Esau became the founder of an enemy nation. He was exiled from his family for years. Ironically, Jacob would have received the birthright and the blessing anyway. And you said that. Imagine how different life would have been had he and his mother waited for God to work in his way in his time. They could have saved a lot of heartache. In ancient times, a person's word was binding, much like a written contract today, especially when it was a formal oath. This is why Isaac's blessing was irrevocable. And also, they would normally wait to closer to the end of the life to give these blessings because they couldn't change it once it happened. It says, before the father died, he performed a ceremony of blessing in which he officially handed over the birthright to the rightful heir. Although the firstborn son was entitled to the birthright, it was not actually his until the blessing was pronounced. Before the blessing was given, the father could take the birthright away from the oldest son and give it to a more deserving son. But after the blessing was given, the birthright could no longer be taken away. This is why fathers usually waited until late in life to pronounce the blessing. Although Jacob had been given the birthright by his older brother years before, he still needed his father's blessing to make it binding. Remember, he gave up his birthright for a bowl of soup.
Stew. Yeah, red stew it was called.
Yeah. Yep. So,
that answered your question on why he just couldn't reverse it.
Yeah. You just can't, like today, if you would have given one of the kids a blessing, I mean, it didn't mean the same thing as it did back then, but you couldn't just say, oh, wait, I changed my mind.
Right.
All right.
Yeah, the fact is, if they just would have waited, if they just would have faithfully waited on God,
the whole family,
this whole thing would have been, wouldn't have been such a mess.
And you would think that the brothers, being the age they were and not little kids, could you imagine if they had worked together? They both had different interests. They both had different God-given talents. And in a lot of families where there's strife, if you try to complement each other instead of working against each other.
I blame the parents for that.
Well, they did. They caused that.
I think the parents drove the division between them.
Yeah. You should never make one child feel more special than another. And it does. Then it causes jealousy, the rivalry between the two, always wanting one or the other's attention.
You have to wonder, we saw what the consequences of those actions were. Mm-hmm. What the blessings would have been for that family if they would have waited.
That's right.
And just did as God wanted them to do.
And I think there again, I mentioned before, I do believe that if you do what God commands you to do, or what He commands all of us to do, we will reap the blessings. It may not always be financially. We had talked about that before. We might not always avoid pain in life.
Or you won't.
But it is a strength. I've seen people who follow God and they have a strength that a lot of people don't have or can't understand. And it's a strength that keeps them going through this life.
Well, if we are obedient to what God tells us, there's a lot of different types of blessings. Mm-hmm. But we reap those blessings when we do follow God.
We do. Would you read verses 30 through 40?
After Isaac finished blessing him, and Jacob scarcely left his father's presence, his brother Esau came in from hunting. He too prepared some tasty food and brought it to his father. Then he said to him, "My father, please sit up and eat some of my games, that you will give me your blessing." His father Isaac asked him, "Who are you?" "I am your son," he answered, "your firstborn, Esau." Isaac trembled violently and said, "Who was it then that hunted game and brought it to me? I ate it just before you came, and I blessed him, and indeed he will be blessed." When Esau heard his father's words, he burst out with a loud and bitter cry and said to his father, "Bless me too, my father." But he said, "Your brother came deceitfully and took your blessing." Esau said, "Isn't he rightly named Jacob? This is the second time he has taken advantage of me. He took my birthright, and now he's taken my blessing." Then he asked, "Haven't you reserved any blessing for me?" Isaac answered Esau, "I have made him lord over you, and have made all of his relatives his servants. And I have sustained him with grain and new wine. So what can I possibly do for you, my son?" Esau said to his father, "Do you have only one blessing, my father? Bless me too, my father." Then Esau wept aloud. His father Isaac answered him, "Your dwelling will be away from the earth's richness, away from the dew of the heaven above. You will live by the sword, and you will serve your brother. But when you grow restless, you will throw his yoke from off of your neck."
This blessing doesn't really sound like a blessing, does it?
Not really, no.
No, it says,
You will live by the sword, and you will serve your brother.
yeah, and it says your dwelling will be away from the earth's richness and away from the dew of heaven above. But one thing later on, and we'll have to maybe do one on that, is 20 years later, whenever it sounded like Esau did okay for himself when the brothers meet up again, and we'll have to discuss that later. But I was wondering, what does "when you grow restless, you will throw his yoke from off your neck"? And I looked up a little something. It says, I think it would be accurate to say that Jacob's yoke was broken off Esau when Jacob returned from being away for 20 years and bowed down to Esau and called him Lord. They're going to meet up 20 years later.
That'll be another talk time.
That'll be another talk time. But you know what's great is when people who are at odds with each other, who don't get along, who almost have hatred for each other, what is a fantastic thing is when they can be healed and that relationship can be restored. That's when we know God's at work.
Yeah, and we see that happening between the two brothers.
Yes. So I'm going to move on, and I'm going to read verses 41 through 45. Esau held a grudge against Jacob. Because of the blessing his father had given him, he said to himself, "The days of mourning for my father are near. Then I will kill my brother Jacob." When Rebekah was told what her older son Esau had said, she sent for her younger son Jacob and said to him, "Your brother Esau is planning to avenge himself by killing you. Now then, my son, do what I say." Once again, do what I say. She needs to stop. "Flee at once to my brother Laban in Haran. Stay with him for a while until your brother's fury subsides. When your brother is no longer angry with you and forgets what you did to him, I'll send word for you to come back from there. Why should I lose both of you in one day?" Well, the sad part is here, she never does see Jacob again.
She never sees him again.
Yeah, because 20 years is going to pass before even the boys meet up together. So that's sad. That right there, that's just a sad story when you think about it. All the deception and the hurt and the anger. Have you ever felt like killing someone? Could you imagine, like, he must have been so angry where he says, you might say, but I wonder if he would have actually gone through with it. Probably he would have.
I would not doubt that he would have.
Yeah. You looked at me.
Well, the mother, Rebecca, was convinced that he was going to.
Yeah. So she felt pretty confident that Jacob better get the heck out of Dodge, else he wasn't going to be around much longer. Now, one thing here, we all say poor Esau, poor Esau, his birthright, the blessing, all of that was taken. But in all reality, he wasn't to get it anyway. But look here, Esau was so angry at Jacob that he failed to see his own wrong in giving the birthright away in the first place.
Right.
Apparently, he didn't think too much of his birthright if he thought a bowl of soup was more important.
Well, in this other commentary, he made it sound like he was not a man that was too concerned about spiritual things. He had married two women, and they were called heathen women that Jacob nor Rebekah approved of.
Well, that's probably why then Rebekah said to Isaac, I am disgusted with living because of these Hittite women. If Jacob takes a wife from among the women of this land, from Hittite women like these, my life will not be worth living.
Yeah, Esau caused them problems.
Yeah.
And marrying two women. And then he even married a third one later on that even caused him more grief. And he did that out of spite. So, and then he gave away his birthright. So he didn't care too much about any of that. So it's just as much his fault.
But he doesn't want to see that it's his fault.
Yeah, he had a part to play, no doubt.
I read one little thing where they classified Esau as a foolish man. You know.
Well, apparently, yes.
Yeah. So.
You figure in that society, the firstborn, the one who had the birthright, is responsible for the family.
Yeah.
He is the one that takes care of everybody if the father dies or when the father dies. So he didn't really care about any of that. He didn't respect that.
That's true. So he probably would not have been the best choice for after Isaac died, and God must have known that.
Well, yeah, well, that was God's plan. If he knew who Esau was going to be, so Esau had a part to play. So.
Well, I think we all have a part to play whenever it comes to problems, and we have to realize and have to take responsibility for our own actions.
Well, we always want to blame the other person.
That's true. So I'm just going to finish here with truth for today. This wasn't Jacob and Esau's first clash involving their respective positions as heirs. We're going to talk a little bit here about what the soup deal is, Prior to this episode, Esau had returned home famished one day and foolishly traded away his birthright to Jacob for a bowl of stew. His attitude toward his status of the eldest son was so indifferent that it is said of this incident that Esau despised his birthright. Ironically, the Lord had already revealed to Rebekah during her pregnancy, clear back in the pregnancy, that she would have twins and that the older shall serve the younger. And Esau was born first, so he was actually classified the older.
He's the oldest one.
Yep. Rather than leaving things be, Rebekah schemed to deceive blind Isaac in order for Jacob to receive his blessing. And in Jacob, Rebekah had a willing accomplice. While successful in having Jacob receive Isaac's blessing, the deceit further fractured the already fragile family, resulting in Jacob fleeing in fear to Haran, the faraway home of Rebekah's family, never to see his mother alive again. Oh, the unintended pain and repercussions when we plot and scheme to manipulate circumstances to our advantage. And it says here, you can make many plans, but the Lord's purpose will prevail.
And it did.
It did. It doesn't matter what we do. It always does. Whatever happens, whatever we try to plan, and if it's outside of God's plan, it doesn't matter because His plan will prevail. Yeah. We can close with it. Did we ever pray before we got started?
No, we didn't.
Oh,
we got to do this all over again.
Yeah, we're going to do it all over. Now you can pray. We'll close with a word of prayer.
Father, we just thank you for this day. We thank you for this time that we can spend together in your word. And Father, I just ask your blessings tonight on those who are watching and listening. Father, just reveal yourself to them through your word. And we just thank you for watching over all of us and be with us as we start a new week tomorrow. And Father, also help us to realize that your plan is the right plan, and we just need to follow you and be faithful to you and trusting to you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thanks for joining us once again, and we will see you. Let me see what the story is for next week. I already closed up the book. Well, we might just kind of go further with this story with the boys.
Well, we definitely can.
Let me just see here. Maybe that's what we'll do. Yeah, the next one after that says Joseph's coat and dreams, but let's just elaborate a little bit more on this story, and we'll see how things work out.
Sounds good.
See you next week.
Bye.